The rain hammered the roof of the taxi like bullets as we pulled up the long gravel driveway. I pressed my palm against the cold window, watching the Hampton estate emerge through the downpour. My estate, bought 3 years ago for $4.5 million as a sanctuary for Sandra and me in our twilight years. Except tonight, it didn't look like a sanctuary. It looked like a nightclub. Every window blazed with light. Bass pounded through the double oak doors hard enough to rattle the glass. The driveway was lined with cars that belonged in a showroom. Porsches, Mercedes, a cherry red Tesla. I counted at least 15 vehicles, all gleaming despite the rain. "That'll be $68, the driver said, his accent thick. Russian, maybe Ukrainian. I paid him in cash, told him to keep the change. My hands shook slightly as I counted the bills, and not from the cold. 4 months of physical therapy in Zurich couldn't completely erase the tremor that came with a triple bypass surgery. The scar on my chest throbbed dully beneath my soaked coat, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to dying on an operating table 6,000 miles from home. I told no one about the surgery, not Sandra, not Brianna, and certainly not Justin. I'd wanted to handle it alone, the way I'd handled everything in my 68 years, from bankruptcy to building a logistics empire that moved cargo across 3 continents. Privacy was control, and control was survival. Now, standing in the freezing rain, I wondered if that decision had been my first mistake. I climbed the stone steps slowly, favoring my right leg. The physical therapist said the weakness would fade with time, but time felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. Each step sent a sharp pain through my knee, arthritis probably, though I'd refused to get it checked. At my age, doctors only found problems, never solutions. The wind howled off the Atlantic, cutting through my coat like it wasn't there. October in the Hamptons was supposed to be beautiful. Golden leaves, crisp air, the last gasp of summer warmth. Instead, it felt like winter had arrived early, angry and unforgiving. As I reached the top step, I saw it. At first, I thought it was a pile of laundry someone had left out, maybe a dog bed that had blown off the porch furniture. But then it moved, a small, pathetic shiver that made my blood run cold. I moved closer, squinting through the rain. It was a person. A small, frail person, curled into a fetal position on the welcome mat, right next to the door where 50 people were drinking champagne and laughing. They were covered in an oversized gray sweatshirt that looked like it had been fished out of a dumpster, the fabric dark with rainwater and filth. My heart seized. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the scream of pain from my surgical scars. My hands shook as I reached out and pulled back the hood. The air left my lungs in a rush that left me dizzy. Sandra. My wife of 40 years, the woman who'd stood beside me when I was a truck driver earning minimum wage, who'd worn pearls to church basement dinners and made them look like diamonds. The woman who'd never raised her voice, never complained, never asked for anything but my time. She was unrecognizable. Her silver hair, usually styled in elegant waves, was matted to her skull with mud and something darker, grease maybe or worse. Her face had hollowed out, the skin stretched tight over her cheekbones like parchment paper. She smelled of urine and garbage, a stench so overwhelming I had to breathe through my mouth. Her lips were blue. "Sandra," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Sandra, it's me. It's Kenneth." She didn't open her eyes. She whimpered, a soft animal sound that didn't belong in a human throat, and pulled something closer to her chest. It was a piece of bread. A heel of stale bread, hard as a rock, probably a week old. She was clutching it like a diamond, like it was the only thing between her and starvation. "Sandra, look at me." I touched her shoulder gently. She flinched away from my hand. Her eyes snapped open, wide, terrified, unfocused. She looked at me the way a beaten dog looks at a stranger with a raised hand. There was no recognition, no love, no Sandra, just fear. Before I could process what I was seeing, the heavy oak doors swung open behind me. Heat rolled out, expensive artificial warmth carrying the scent of Chanel No. 5 and aged scotch. Laughter spilled onto the porch, the kind of laughter that came from people who'd never missed a meal or worried about a mortgage. I pulled back instinctively, pressing myself into the shadow of a stone pillar. Justin Wade stepped out first. He looked impeccable. Navy blue Italian suit that I knew cost $3,000 because I'd seen the credit card bill 2 months ago. His hair was styled with some kind of gel that made it look effortlessly tousled, like he'd just rolled out of bed with a supermodel. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand, Macallan 25 if I knew Justin, and a Cuban cigar in the other. Behind him came his guests, 3 men in expensive suits, 2 women in cocktail dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They all held champagne flutes, all wore Rolex watches, all had the sleek, well-fed look of predators who'd never gone hungry. "Great party, Justin," one of the men said, clapping him on the shoulder. He was young, maybe 35, with slicked-back blonde hair and a tan that came from a salon, not the sun. "You really outdid yourself. The real estate market must be booming." Justin laughed, the sound smooth and confident. "You know me, Carter. I've got the golden touch." He took a long drag from his cigar, blew smoke into the night air. "Buy low, sell high, repeat until you're too rich to fail." They all laughed at that. It was the kind of joke that only worked when you were standing in a $4 million house. Justin took a step forward, then stopped. He looked down. He saw Sandra. For a split second, I expected shock, concern, the bare minimum of human decency. Instead, his face twisted with annoyance, the kind of annoyance you'd show a piece of gum stuck to your shoe. "Oh, watch your step, folks," Justin said, his voice dripping with mock apology. He lifted his right foot, wearing the limited edition Ferragamo loafers I'd given him for Christmas, the ones that cost $1,200. And then, right in front of me, he placed the sole of his shoe on Sandra's shoulder. He dragged his foot down her arm, slowly, deliberately, wiping mud from the garden onto her filthy sweatshirt, using my wife as a doormat. "Justin, what is that?" one of the women asked, wrinkling her nose. She was young, mid-20s, with the kind of blonde hair that required a colorist in a trust fund. "Is that a person?" Justin laughed again, the sound casual, unbothered. "Oh, don't pay attention to that. That's just the old maid. She's completely senile, crazy as a bat. She refuses to sleep inside. Thinks she's a guard dog or something. We let her sleep out here because she ruins the furniture." The guests chuckled nervously, the kind of laughter that said they weren't sure if this was funny or horrifying, but they'd go along with it because challenging the host was social suicide. "She looks hungry," the blonde said, her voice uncertain. "She's fine," Justin said, taking a sip of his scotch. "She likes it. It's part of her condition. Come on, let's go by the pool. I want to show you the plans for the new wing I'm building." He kicked Sandra. Not hard enough to break a bone, but hard enough to send a message. "Move. Get out of the way, you old hag." Sandra let out a small cry and scrambled backward on her hands and knees, pressing herself against the brick wall, trying to make herself invisible. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a snap. It was more like a wall crumbling. The wall I'd built over 68 years to separate civilized Kenneth from the kid who'd grown up in the shipyards, who'd learned to fight before he learned to read. I forgot about the pain in my chest. I forgot about the cane I'd left in the taxi. I felt the strength of the man who used to load cargo ships with his bare hands return to me like muscle memory. I stepped out from behind the pillar. The porch light hit my face. Justin was mid-laugh, turning back to his guests. He froze. The cigar slipped from his fingers and hit the stone floor with a soft hiss, rolling away into the rain. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The guests stopped laughing. They looked from Justin to me, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere like animals sensing a storm. I stood there, rain dripping from the brim of my hat onto my face. I looked at my wife cowering against the wall, clutching her piece of bread. Then I looked at the man I'd welcomed into my family. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. My voice was low, calm, and terrifyingly steady. "Justin." He took a stumbling step back, nearly tripping over Sandra. Kenneth, Dad, you're supposed to be in Switzerland. You're not supposed to be back until next month," I finished for him. I changed my plans. I looked down at his feet, at the $1,200 loafers with mud and worse on the soles. "Those shoes cost more than most people make in a week, Justin," I said quietly. "But the price you're about to pay for what you just did?" I took a step closer. "That's going to cost you more than your life." The scotch glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the porch, sending amber liquid and crystal shards everywhere. Behind him, Brianna appeared in the doorway. My daughter. 35 years old, beautiful in the way her mother had been at that age. She was wearing a diamond necklace that made my heart sink. A vintage Cartier piece, double strand, $50,000. Sandra's necklace, the one I'd given her for our 40th anniversary. When Brianna saw me, she grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "Daddy," she whispered. I looked at her, at the diamonds around her neck that didn't belong to her, at the wine glass in her hand, at the guilt written across her face in letters 10 feet tall. Then I looked back at her mother, shivering in the mud. "Get inside," I said. "The party's over." Justin moved faster than I expected. The fear on his face vanished, replaced by a mask of concern so thick it was suffocating. He rushed past me, scooping Sandra up from the cold stone as if he hadn't just kicked her ribs a moment ago. "Dad! Oh my God! Dad!" he shouted, his voice pitching up into a performance of frantic worry. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" He turned to the stunned guests still holding their champagne in the doorway. "Everyone, this is my father-in-law. The surgery, it affected his memory. He gets confused. He wanders." He looked down at Sandra, cradling her dirty head against his expensive suit without flinching at the smell. "And Mom, oh, Sandra, you naughty girl. You know the doctor said 20 minutes for the cold therapy, not an hour." He looked at me with wide, innocent eyes that chilled my blood. "It's a new holistic treatment, Kenneth, for her circulation. She insists on doing it outside on the stone. We can barely stop her." I stood there, leaning on willpower instead of the cane I didn't have, watching him. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was rewriting reality in real time, painting himself as the concerned son-in-law and me as the confused old man. "Come inside," Justin urged, gesturing to the guests to clear a path. "You must be freezing. Let's get you warmed up." We moved inside. The heat hit me first, a blast of artificial warmth that made my wet clothes steam. I looked around the great room, and my chest tightened. My room, my house. But it wasn't my house anymore. The hand-carved mahogany furniture I'd imported from Italy, gone. The oil paintings of the Hudson River Valley that I'd collected for 30 years, missing. In their place were gaudy gold-plated statues that looked like they belonged in a rapper's mansion, and white leather sofas straight out of a Miami nightclub. The walls had been repainted in electric blue that hurt my eyes. My legacy had been stripped to the studs and replaced with cheap flash. Brianna stood by the marble fireplace, shaking slightly. Her hand gripped a fresh glass of wine so hard her knuckles were white. The diamonds at her throat caught the light, mocking me. "Where is my furniture, Brianna?" I asked, my voice calm, but inside I was screaming. "Where are your mother's doctors? Why does she look like a concentration camp survivor?" Justin interrupted before she could answer, gently depositing Sandra onto one of the white sofas where she curled up immediately, muddying the leather. "We redecorated, Dad. Modernized the place to increase property value. You know how the market is." He loosened his tie, playing the part of the exhausted but dutiful caretaker. "And the doctors, they're expensive frauds. We're treating her holistically now. Kale smoothies and fresh air. It's much better for her spirit." He was smiling that salesman smile, the one he used to close deals on condos that didn't exist yet. I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers closed around the cold metal of my phone. I needed the police. I needed an ambulance. I needed to get Sandra out of this house before morning. "I'm calling the authorities," I said, pulling out the device. "This ends now." Justin lunged. He didn't strike me. He was too smart for that with witnesses around. Instead, he grabbed my wrist with a grip of iron, squeezing a pressure point that made my fingers go numb. He wrenched the phone from my hand with a speed that belied his apparent drunkenness. "No, no, no," he said, shaking his head at the guests. "See? The anesthesia. He's paranoid. He thinks we're enemies. It's a side effect, post-operative delirium." He slipped my phone into his own pocket, patting it securely. "I'll keep this safe for you, Dad. You need rest. You're clearly not yourself." "Give me my phone, Justin," I growled, trying to stand tall, but my chest was throbbing and my legs felt like lead. "Gentlemen," Justin snapped his fingers. Two men stepped out from the hallway leading to the kitchen. They weren't my security detail. I'd never seen them before. They were massive, wearing ill-fitting black suits with necks as thick as tree trunks and dead eyes. They moved with the heavy grace of hired muscle. "Escort Mr. Taylor to his suite," Justin ordered, his voice flat. "He needs quiet. No phone, No disturbances. He's very agitated. One of the men grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep, hitting a nerve that sent a shockwave of pain down to my hand. I tried to pull away, but I was weak, too weak to fight them off. I looked at Brianna. My flesh and blood. The girl I'd paid for college, for her wedding, for her first house. "Brianna," I said, my voice rough, "stop this. Help me." She turned her back. She picked up her glass and stared into the fire, refusing to acknowledge the father being manhandled in her living room. The men dragged me toward a narrow service door leading to the lower levels. "My room is upstairs," I said, digging my heels into the plush carpet. "Not anymore," Justin said, stepping close to me, his voice dropping to a whisper so only I could hear. "The master suite is ours now, Dad. You get the guest quarters downstairs. It's quieter there, better for your condition." He winked, a slow, deliberate wink that told me exactly who was in charge. The guards hauled me backward. As we passed a large hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of the scene, Justin looking smug, adjusting his cuffs, Brianna drinking to forget, and Sandra on the white sofa, staring at nothing. I searched for my wife in that blank stare, the woman who knew my soul, who'd held my hand through bankruptcy and success. But there was nothing there. Her pupils were dilated to the size of saucers. She didn't look at me with love or even recognition. She looked at me like I was a stranger. They had not just neglected her, they had erased her. And as the basement door loomed closer, I realized with terrifying clarity that I was now a prisoner in the empire I had built. The heavy metal door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. The lock clicked, a sound like a gunshot in the silence. I was alone in the cold, damp air of what used to be my wine cellar. I tried to stand, but my legs finally gave out. I slid down the rough concrete wall, hitting the floor with a groan that tore at my surgical stitches. The room smelled of mildew and rotting cardboard. My eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom, illuminated only by a thin sliver of light bleeding in from the gap beneath the door. This was not the climate-controlled sanctuary I'd built to house vintage Bordeaux and rare scotches. The wine racks were gone. The temperature control system had been ripped out. In their place were piles of broken furniture, garbage bags filled with God knows what, and the unmistakable rusted shapes of old garden tools. They had turned my wine cellar into a junk room, and now I was just another piece of trash to be stored away. I sat there, breathing through the pain in my chest, trying to calm my racing heart before it triggered an alarm on the internal monitor tracking my recovery. The lock clicked again. The door swung open, and a silhouette filled the frame. One of the guards. He was holding something, no, someone. He stepped inside and unceremoniously dropped his burden onto a pile of old curtains in the corner. Sandra landed with a soft thud, making no sound of protest, just a small whimper that broke my heart. "Sweet dreams," the guard sneered. "Don't make a mess." The door slammed shut again. I scrambled across the floor on my hands and knees, ignoring the sharp debris digging into my palms. "Sandra," I whispered, reaching out until my fingers brushed the rough fabric of her sweatshirt. "Sandra, it's me." She was shivering violently. I pulled her into my arms, trying to share whatever body warmth I had left. She felt incredibly fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones. "I need to check you," I said softly. "I need to see if you're hurt." She didn't resist. She was past resisting. I carefully rolled up the sleeves of her filthy sweatshirt. In the dim light, I saw them, dark purple bruises encircling her wrists, perfect rings, the unmistakable marks of restraints. They had been tying her up. My jaw clenched so hard I felt a tooth crack. I moved my hands to her back, checking for broken ribs from Justin's kick earlier. As I lifted the hem of her shirt, I saw the imprint, a muddy tread mark stamped clearly onto her pale skin. The sole of a designer loafer. Justin had branded her like cattle. I gently patted her pockets, looking for anything. A weapon, a key, a phone. My hand closed around a piece of paper that had been balled up and shoved deep into her pants pocket. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat on the floor, angling it toward the sliver of light under the door. The handwriting was jagged and hasty, written in red marker. Dog menu. Monday, morning, water, evening to crusts. Tuesday, morning, water, evenings, broth. Wednesday, fasting. I stared at the paper. The letters swam before my eyes. This was not just neglect. This was systematic torture. They were starving her. They were dehumanizing her. They were treating the woman who raised their wife like a stray animal they were trying to kill without leaving a mark. I folded the paper and put it in my own pocket. This was evidence. This was the death warrant I would use to bury them when I got out of here. And I would get out. I shifted position, leaning back against a rusted filing cabinet. I pulled back the cuff of my left sleeve, looking at my vintage Omega Seamaster, a watch I'd worn for 20 years. To the naked eye, it was just a classic mechanical timepiece. But 4 months ago, before I left for Zurich, I'd had it modified by a specialist in Tel Aviv. Inside the casing, beneath the gears, was a microtransmitter, a GPS beacon capable of sending a distress signal to my private security team in London. I verified Sandra was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. I rotated the bezel 3 times to the left and pressed the crown down for 5 seconds. A tiny red LED, usually invisible beneath the 12 o'clock marker, should have pulsed green to indicate signal lock. It pulsed red, once, twice, then nothing. I tried again. Red. My stomach dropped. No signal. I looked up at the ceiling. The floorboards above were vibrating. The bass from the party was getting louder. But that wasn't what was blocking the signal. A simple floor wouldn't stop a military-grade transmitter. Jammers. Justin had installed signal jammers. He had turned this house into a black site. This wasn't just a greedy son-in-law seizing an opportunity. This was a calculated hostile takeover. He had isolated the house, blocked communications, and secured the perimeter. He was running this like a prison. If the signal couldn't get out, no one knew I was here. My lawyer, Rebecca Hamilton, thought I was still in recovery in Zurich. My staff thought I was unreachable. I was a ghost. I sat there in the darkness holding my wife, feeling the cold seep into my bones. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because Justin Wade had made a critical mistake. He had taken everything I had to lose, which meant I had nothing left to hold me back. He had created a monster, and soon he would meet it. Sunlight felt like a physical blow when the guard hauled me up the basement stairs. My eyes burned as the sterile white light of the kitchen flooded my vision. I was shoved onto a hard stool at the island, my joints screaming in protest. A plastic container slid across the quartz countertop, stopping inches from my hand. Inside was congealed risotto and shrimp tails from last night's party. It smelled of stale wine and neglect. Beside it sat a glass of tap water. "Eat," the guard grunted, leaning against the refrigerator, already bored, scrolling through his phone. Across the island, Brianna sat hunched over a steaming mug of coffee. She looked wretched, skin sallow, eyes bloodshot, likely nursing a hangover from the cheap champagne Justin had been pouring like water. She wore silk pajamas that cost more than my first car, yet she looked like a prisoner in her own home. "Brianna," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper, "where is your mother?" She didn't look up. She stared into the black liquid in her mug. "She's in the garden. She likes the rain." Lies. They had left her out in the storm again. Rage flared in my chest, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed clarity. I needed an opening. Suddenly, Brianna stood up, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked green. Without a word, she rushed toward the powder room down the hall, retching before she even cleared the doorway. She left her iPad Pro sitting on the counter. The screen was still glowing. This was it. I looked at the guard. He was laughing at something on his phone, completely checked out. I leaned forward, feigning a cough to cover the sound of the tablet sliding across the smooth stone. I pulled it close, shielding it with my body. My fingers hovered over the screen. Passcode. I didn't need to guess. Brianna had used the same code since high school, 1189, her birth month and year. The device unlocked. I didn't go to email. I didn't check the news. I went straight to the browser and typed in the URL for Zurich Private Bank. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from focused, lethal adrenaline. I entered my username. The password was a string of alphanumeric characters based on the hull numbers of my first 3 cargo ships, a sequence I'd memorized 20 years ago. The page loaded. The spinning wheel seemed to mock me for an eternity. Then the dashboard appeared. The air left my lungs. Where there should have been a balance of over $15 million in liquid assets, there was a single digit, 0. Actually, it was worse. It was negative, overdraft fees. I tapped the transaction history. My eyes scanned the carnage. It was a bloodbath. Transfers of $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, all executed in the last 4 months, all authorized with a digital signature that looked exactly like mine. The destinations were a laundry list of the untraceable: Crypto.com, Binance, a dozen offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands with names like Blue Horizon LLC and Shadow Corp. They hadn't just stolen the money, they had laundered it, scattering my life's work into the digital wind. $15 million, gone. My chest tightened. That money was the foundation. It was the pension fund for my employees. It was the security for Sandra. "Looking for something, Dad?" The voice was smooth, mocking. I didn't have time to close the tab. Justin walked into the kitchen, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. He looked fresh, rested, wearing a polo shirt that showed off his gym-sculpted arms. He walked right up to me and plucked the tablet from my hands as easily as taking candy from a baby. "You shouldn't be looking at screens," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "The blue light is bad for your recovery. The doctor said you need mental rest." "You stole $15 million, I said, my voice low, deadly steady. "You drained the accounts. You emptied everything." Justin laughed. He walked to the coffee machine and poured himself a cup using my favorite mug. "Stole is such a harsh word, Kenneth. I prefer reallocated. And besides, I didn't steal anything." He reached into a leather portfolio sitting on the counter and pulled out a document. He slid it across the quartz. "You gave it to me." I looked down. It was a durable power of attorney. It granted Justin full legal authority over my finances, my medical decisions, and my assets. At the bottom was my signature. It wasn't a forgery. It was my handwriting, shaky, weak, but mine. I remembered. The memory clawed its way through the fog of the past, the night before the surgery, in the hotel. Justin had said it was a hospital release form. He'd said they needed it, just in case. And I'd signed it. "You trusted me," Justin said, taking a sip of coffee. "And the best part? The incapacitation clause. It covers mental confusion, paranoia, post-operative delirium, all things you're currently suffering from, according to Dr. Foster on my payroll. Legally, Kenneth, you are incompetent. I am your guardian." He leaned in close, his smile vanishing. "I own you. I own your money. I own this house. You're just a guest here, a guest we can evict whenever we want." "You think you've won?" I said, meeting his gaze. "But you moved too fast. The IRS flags transfers over $10,000. You moved millions. The paper trail will hang you." "The accounts are in your name, Kenneth," Justin countered, his eyes cold. "The transfers were authorized by your signature. If anyone goes to jail for tax evasion, it'll be you, the senile old tycoon trying to hide his assets before he dies." He signaled to the guard. "Take him back downstairs. He looks like he's lost his appetite." The guard grabbed my arm, hauling me off the stool. As I was dragged away, Justin turned his back on me, pulling out his phone. "Yes, I'm looking at the Bentley, in black." He thought I was broken. He thought I was finished. But as the basement door loomed, a cold resolve settled over me. He had taken everything I had to lose, which meant I had nothing left to hold me back. He had created a monster, and soon he would meet it. The afternoon sun beat down on the back of my neck with a cruelty that felt personal. I was on my knees in the dirt of my own backyard, holding a rusty trowel that Justin had tossed at my feet an hour ago. He'd told me that if I wanted to eat dinner tonight, I had to earn my keep. The rose bushes needed pruning. The weeds were out of control. It was a lie, of course. He didn't care about the roses. He just wanted to see Kenneth Taylor, the man who once commanded fleets of container ships, crawling in the mud like a peasant. I dug into the hard, dry earth, wincing as the motion pulled at the scar tissue on my chest. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. 10 feet away, Sandra sat on the grass. She was staring at a line of ants marching across a stone paver, her expression vacant and lost. She was wearing the same filthy sweatshirt, humming a discordant tune that had no melody. I crawled over to her, dragging my stiff leg. The guard stationed by the back door was busy flirting with one of the housemaids and wasn't paying attention to us. "Sandra," I whispered, wiping a smudge of soil from her cheek with my thumb. "It's me, it's Kenneth. Look at me." She didn't blink. She continued to watch the ants, rocking back and forth slightly. Her eyes were glazed over, a milky film of dissociation that made her look like a doll left out in the rain. I felt a surge of despair so black it almost swallowed me whole. They had broken her. They had taken my brilliant, vibrant wife and turned her into this shell. I reached for her hand, intending to squeeze it, to offer some small comfort in this hell we were living in. As my fingers closed around hers, her humming stopped abruptly. Her hand, which had been limp a moment ago, suddenly gripped mine with a strength that shocked me. It was a vice grip, sharp and desperate. I froze. I looked at her face. Her expression hadn't changed. She was still staring at the ants, her mouth still slack. But her eyes had shifted. For a split second, the fog cleared. The vacancy vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp clarity that I remembered from 40 years of marriage. She wasn't looking at me directly. She was too smart for that, knowing we were being watched. But she was present. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't senile. She was playing the role of a lifetime. She was surviving the only way a defenseless woman could in a house full of wolves. She had made herself invisible by making herself pathetic. "Kenneth," she breathed. The word was barely a ghost of a sound, not even a whisper, just a shaping of air. I leaned in closer, pretending to adjust the collar of her shirt, shielding our faces from the guard. "I'm here, Sandra," I murmured. "I'm going to get us out." "False bottom," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "In the study. The safe. 102,485. My heart hammered against my ribs. October 24th, 1985. Our wedding anniversary. She knew. She knew about the safe Justin had installed. She had been watching him, listening to him while he treated her like furniture. She had gathered intelligence while they mocked her. "Don't react," she hissed, the old steel returning to her voice. "They're watching. He's drowning, Kenneth. He's scared." Before I could ask what she meant, she let out a loud, wailing moan and pulled her hand away from me, flapping her arms as if she were chasing away invisible flies. She went back to rocking, back to the vacant stare, back to being the crazy old maid. I sat back on my heels, stunned. My wife was a warrior. She had just handed me a weapon. I looked up toward the house. The French doors to the terrace swung open, and Justin stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual smirk. He was wearing a bathrobe that looked disheveled, his hair messy. He held a phone to his ear, his knuckles white as he gripped the device. He didn't see us, or he didn't care. He paced the length of the slate patio, aggressively kicking a patio chair out of his way. I watched him closely. I had spent decades negotiating with union leaders, corrupt port officials, and hostile board members. I knew how to read body language. I knew the difference between a man who was in control and a man who was cornered. Justin was cornered. He was sweating despite the cool ocean breeze. He was gesturing wildly with his free hand. I dragged myself a few feet closer, moving behind a large hydrangea bush, pretending to pull weeds. I needed to hear him. "I don't have it today," Justin shouted into the phone, his voice cracking. "The transfer is delayed. The bank flagged it. I need more time." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. His face went pale, a sickly gray color that looked terrible in the sunlight. No, you can't do that," Justin pleaded, his arrogance evaporating. "Listen to me. I have the assets. I have the house. I have the old man's portfolio. It's liquid. I just need to wash it. Give me 48 hours, please. Just 48 hours, and I'll pay you double the vig." He stopped again, listening to a threat. I could tell by the way his shoulders hunched, by the way he instinctively brought his hand up to cover his throat. "I'll get it," Justin whispered, now terrified. "I swear, do not touch her. Do not touch Brianna. I will get you the cash." He ended the call and stood there, shaking, staring at the phone in his hand like it was a bomb. Then he turned and hurled the device across the patio. It shattered against the stone wall. I stayed hidden behind the hydrangea, my mind racing. I began to do the math, the terrible, ruthless math of the criminal underworld. I had seen the accounts. Justin had drained $15 million in liquid cash. He had liquidated company assets for probably another $20 or $30 million. He had access to a fortune. A man with $40 million doesn't beg for 48 hours. A man with that kind of cash doesn't scream about paying double the interest. A man who has successfully stolen an empire doesn't look like he's about to vomit from fear. Unless the money was already gone. All of it. It didn't make sense. You can't spend $40 million in 4 months on cars and parties. Even with his lavish lifestyle, the math didn't add up, unless he wasn't spending it, unless he was paying for a mistake. Crypto. I remembered the transaction logs, the transfers to Binance, the offshore shells. He hadn't just been hiding the money, he had been investing it, gambling it. Justin, the arrogant real estate agent who thought he was a financial genius, had likely leveraged my fortune on speculative coins that had since crashed to zero. But banks don't threaten to hurt your wife. Banks send foreclosure notices. When the market crashed and he lost my money, he must have tried to chase his losses. He must have borrowed to cover the margin calls. And when traditional lenders said no, he went to the lenders who didn't ask for credit scores. He went to the lenders who asked for collateral in blood. He owed the mob, or a cartel, or someone even worse. That was why he needed to kill me. That was why he needed the trust fund released immediately. He wasn't trying to get rich anymore. He was trying to stay alive. Suddenly, the gravel of the driveway crunched loudly. It wasn't the sound of a delivery truck or a guest's sports car. It was heavy tires, menacing, deliberate. I looked toward the side gate. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows rolled slowly up the drive. It didn't have license plates. It looked like a hearse designed for the living. It stopped right in front of the main entrance, blocking the path. The engine idled, a low, menacing rumble that vibrated through the ground. Justin froze on the terrace. He stared at the SUV, his eyes wide with horror. He looked like a rabbit caught in the shadow of a hawk. The driver's door didn't open. The passenger door didn't open. Instead, the rear window rolled down slowly. A man sat in the back seat. He was wearing sunglasses even though the day was overcast. His arm rested on the doorframe. I could see the ink, dense tribal tattoos winding down his forearm, covering his wrist, extending onto the back of his hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't gesture. He just took off his sunglasses and looked up at Justin on the balcony. His eyes were dead, cold voids. He held Justin's gaze for 10 long seconds. It was a message, a silent, terrifying confirmation. We know where you live. We know you're home. Time is up. The window rolled back up. The SUV reversed slowly, deliberately, kicking up dust, and then drove away down the lane, disappearing behind the manicured hedges. Justin collapsed onto a patio chair, burying his face in his hands. I looked at the gate where the car had vanished. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The wolves weren't just inside the house anymore. They were at the door, and Justin had just invited them in. I looked back at Sandra. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. Tonight. It had to be tonight. I had the code. I had the motivation, and now I knew exactly who the real enemy was. I wasn't just fighting a greedy son-in-law. I was fighting for our lives against a clock that was ticking down to zero. I stood up, clutching the trowel. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready to dig. But not for weeds. I was digging for the truth that would bury Justin Wade forever. The grandfather clock in the hallway would chime 3 times tonight, deep and mournful. And when it did, I would move. Justin Wade thought he was playing chess, but I was about to flip the board. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times. The house fell silent. The guard at the top of the basement stairs snored heavily, sprawled in his chair. I pushed open the door I'd greased earlier with cooking oil and stepped into the hallway barefoot. I moved through shadows to the study. My sanctuary for 30 years, now reeking of stale cigars and fear. Moonlight through the curtains was enough. I went straight to the built-in bookshelves. Sandra had been right. The false bottom was in the cabinet where I'd kept nautical charts. I knelt, found the hidden catch. Click. The panel opened, revealing a digital safe. I punched in the numbers. 102485. The lock disengaged with a heavy thud. I held my breath. Nothing. No alarm. I pulled the door open. No cash, no gold, just paper. I grabbed the stack of documents, moved to the window for light. The first was a handwritten promissory note. I, Justin Wade, acknowledge a debt of $4 million to the Emerald Syndicate. Payment due November 1st. 3 days ago, I flipped through. More debt notes. Macau Shell Companies. $2.5 million at 5% weekly interest. Gambling markers from Atlantic City. Online betting logs showing catastrophic losses. He'd burned my $15 million on bad bets and poker games. Not a mastermind, a degenerate addict. At the bottom, a manila folder. Medical Kenneth. Inside, a psychiatric evaluation dated 2 months ago, signed by Dr. Richard Foster. Diagnosis: advanced paranoid schizophrenia with rapid onset dementia. Recommendation: immediate and permanent conservatorship. Prognosis: terminal mental decline. Fabricated. This was their legal weapon to strip my rights and lock me away forever. I reached back into the safe. My fingers touched plastic. A burner phone. I powered it on. One message thread. The most recent, 20 minutes ago. "You're out of time, Justin. We know you're in the house. We know the old man is back. We don't care about your family drama. We want our money." I scrolled up. Justin's reply from 3 hours ago. "Please, I need another day. Just one day. I have the assets locked down." The response: "You have 24 hours. Send the coin or we send a courier for your wife's finger." The left one. With the ring. My blood ran cold. They weren't coming for Justin. They were coming for Brianna. He'd used his own wife, my daughter, as collateral, put a price on her head to buy time. I slipped the phone into my pocket. This was it. The smoking gun. I turned to leave. Click. The door opened. Light flooded the room. Brianna stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe, hair loose, face pale. In her right hand, a paring knife, 4 inches of sharp steel. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. I raised my hand slowly. "Brianna, put the knife down." She didn't. She raised it, pointing at my chest. "Justin said you'd try to escape, said you might get violent, said I had to protect the family." "Look at me," I said calmly. "Do I look crazy or do I look like a man who just found out his son-in-law sold you to the mob?" Her eyes widened. Her eyes. "What?" I pulled out the burner phone. "Read this. Read what your husband thinks you're worth." She hesitated, then took the phone with her free hand. Her eyes scanned the screen. I watched her world end. The knife clattered to the floor. She slid down the desk, collapsing onto the rug, the phone falling from her fingers. "He doesn't love you," I said, voice hard. "To him, you're not a wife. You're a shield. Meat he's throwing to wolves to buy 24 more hours." "No," she sobbed. "He drained 15 million in 4 months, gambled it away on crypto and poker. He's desperate, and desperate men have no loyalty. He sold you. That text is the receipt. When the sun comes up, if he doesn't have the money, they're coming for you. Not him, you." She looked up, mascara streaking her face, but beneath the pain, shame, deep shame. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered, kneeling. "You knew he was no good." Her eyes closed. "I knew he had someone else, Ashley, his assistant. 24. I found the messages 3 months ago. Pictures, hotel receipts. He bought her a Cartier bracelet, the same one I wanted." She grabbed my shirt. "I didn't say anything, Daddy. Everyone thinks we're perfect. If I left him, everyone would know I failed. And I let him hurt Mom. I saw him push her, lock her in the rain. I didn't stop him because I was afraid he'd leave me for her." Her confession hung in the air, ugly and raw. I took her hands. "Listen closely. That man upstairs is not your husband. He's a parasite. We don't have time for tears. You have a choice. Stay here and wait for them to come or stand up and help me kill him." "Kill him?" "With the truth. We strip him of every dollar, every lie, every protection. We leave him naked before the law and the men he owes." I pressed the phone into her palm. "I need to make a call. Justin jammed the signals, but this phone is his lifeline to the mob. I need to call Rebecca Hamilton. I need to activate the Omega Protocol." She wiped her face. "What do you need me to do?" "Be his wife one last time. Keep him occupied for 10 minutes. Can you look at the man who sold you and smile?" She stood, smoothed her robe, fixed her hair, walked to the mirror and cleaned her face. When she turned back, she was composed. The mask was back, but this time not for him. For us. "I can do it," she said coldly. "For Mom and for my finger." I stood in my grand foyer wearing a moth-eaten butler's jacket, Sandra beside me in an oversized maid's uniform holding a silver tray of champagne, hands shaking violently. "Walk," Justin commanded. "Drop 1 glass, Sandra goes to the basement for a week without food." The great hall blazed with light. 50 investors, roulette wheels, jazz band, the stench of greed. I moved through the crowd, serving drinks to men young enough to be my grandsons. "Ladies and gentlemen," Justin's voice boomed. He stood on the grand staircase with his scotch. Meet Kenneth and Sandra, my in-laws. Dementia has taken their minds. They think this is a hotel from the 50s. We let them serve. It gives them purpose. Laughter rippled through the crowd, dismissive, pitying. I checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. Almost time. Then I saw her, Ashley Monroe, 24, red silk dress draped over Justin. She whispered in his ear. He kissed her cheek in front of everyone. Around her throat, Sandra's pearls, the double strand I'd bought in Tokyo, our life symbol on the mistress's neck. Sandra saw them. She stopped moving, staring. The fog in her eyes cleared completely. Ashley noticed. "Can I get a refill?" she snapped at Sandra. "Try not to shake so much." Sandra didn't move, paralyzed. "Pour the drink," Justin ordered, descending the stairs. Sandra tried, lifted the pitcher, but her hands were weak, eyes full of tears. The pitcher tipped. Red wine cascaded out, missing the glass, splashing Ashley's dress and white Louboutin heels. "You stupid old hag," Ashley screamed. "These are new. You ruined them." The room went silent. Justin's face purpled. The mask slipped. He stepped forward and swung. Slap. The sound cracked through the hall like a gunshot. Sandra crumpled, hit the marble with a sickening thud. The tray shattered around her, wine and broken glass everywhere. Justin stood over her, breathing hard. "Look what you made me do." Dead silence. The investors stared in horror. I let my tray fall. It clanged on marble. Justin's eyes found mine. I checked my watch. Midnight. Time's up. "What are you going to do, old man?" Justin sneered. "I'm not going to clean it up, Justin," I said, voice projecting across the room. "I'm going to foreclose." The lights went out. Emergency lights flickered on, eerie red glow. While guests were blinded, Brianna appeared, gathering Sandra into her arms. I stripped off the butler's jacket, let it fall, walked to the stage, grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't leave. The entertainment is just beginning." I looked at the crowd. "You came to invest in a vision. Justin Wade told you he's building an empire. But you're not investing in a vision. You're investing in a corpse." "Who is this?" someone shouted. "Kenneth Taylor, founder of Taylor Logistics. Until 10 minutes ago, I was the ghost haunting this house." Murmurs. They knew the name. "Shut up!" Justin lunged. "Security!" But the guards had vanished. The massive LED screen behind the stage flickered to life. Justin Wade, personal holdings minus $4 million. Gasps. "That's fake!" Justin screamed. "Next slide," I said calmly. Video footage appeared. Grainy security camera, the kitchen, Justin grabbing Sandra by the hair, shoving her face onto the counter. Audio crystal clear. "You useless old leech. Why don't you just die? I need the money." Absolute silence. "Next slide." Text messages. "You have 24 hours. Send the coin or we send a courier for your wife's finger, the left one, with the ring." Brianna wailed from behind the bar, heartbroken. Guests looked at Justin with disgust. "You sold your wife to butchers," I said quietly. "No, it was just—" Justin stammered. "Time's up, and this is the most important document." The screen changed. "A debt assignment agreement. Debtor, Justin Wade. Original creditor, Emerald Syndicate. New creditor, Pegasus Group." Justin stared, reading. His eyes went wide as saucers. You bought it." I smiled coldly. "I bought your debt, Justin. All $8 million plus interest, paid cash. The syndicate was happy to sell. That means you don't owe the mob. You owe me. I'm your bank, your landlord, the owner of every breath you take, and I'm calling the loan due immediately." Justin collapsed, sobbing. Sirens wailed. Red and blue lights flashed. Rebecca Hamilton walked in, black umbrella flanked by tactical team. "Mr. Taylor, the transfer is complete. Shall we proceed with eviction?" Police officers entered. "Justin Wade, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and attempted murder." They dragged him away, screaming. I turned to Brianna. She stood there, diamonds still around her neck. Sandra's diamonds. "Daddy, he's gone. I helped you." I walked over, unclasped the necklace. She didn't resist. I pointed to the front door, the one leading into the storm. "Get out." "This is my house. It's Sandra's house. You're trespassing. You chose him every day for 4 months while your mother slept on a doormat. Now go." "Daddy, please, I'm your family." "You fired your family. Security, show her out." Guards lifted her. She screamed, kicked, called for her mother. "Mom, tell him!" Sandra stopped drinking, looked at her daughter being dragged away, sadness in her eyes. Yes, but no hesitation. She turned back to me, took another sip. The door opened. Wind and rain. Brianna deposited on wet steps. Door closed. Lock clicked. I stood in silence holding Sandra's hand. The empire was broken. The family shattered, but the cancer was gone. We had cut it out, and as blue lights flashed through windows, I finally let myself feel the fatigue. It was over. We had survived.